Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 103, titled Men's Mental Health. I had Jake Wickham come back on the podcast. He's been on episode 1483, and he was also co-host of the Quarantine Connection that we did during COVID, like the pandemic. And we talked about men's mental health and bringing awareness to it. We talked things about like therapy. We talked about the Johnny Depp trial. We talked about Will Smith and the Michael B. Jordan, Lori Harvey situation, and kind of like the social media drama around that, and just the way people were talking about men's mental health and like emotions. And it was a really cool topic, and it was nice to have that conversation with my cousin and to kind of just express ourselves in that fashion as two men. So if you guys want to check that out, you can check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. So today, bringing back a former guest from episode 6, Brock Handy.
What's going on? How you doing?
Glad to have you back on, man. This is fucking awesome, man. Because, like, let me see if I can see the date that we did that episode on. When I released it, it was December 30th, 2019. That was when we dropped that episode. That's a long time ago, man. Yeah. We're in 2022. This shit's awesome. So you guys know, as when I bring people back on the podcast, I usually try to make it topic oriented. So this episode is going to be titled Major Life Decisions. Started right there. But before we get into that, we'll have you kind of catch everybody up on what you've been doing and what you've been up to since that last episode.
Yeah. So I kind of listened to kind of honestly give myself a refresher where I was at that time. So since then, like at that time I was working in Foxborough, just doing sales. COVID happened just a few months later. Obviously, COVID, we were all just like working from home, doing our own thing. After COVID, I actually took over my own location, was a general manager out in Plymouth. So I was deep. I was, hour and a half commute, just kind of putting my head down, working hard. Bought a house December 2020. And then just a few months ago, made the decision to leap from the company I've been with for, almost 4 years and went to a new adventure, which I'm at now. I'm a project estimator for a paving company. So totally different, swing of things in a different environment. But and the biggest thing is just a couple of weeks ago, I got married.
So, yeah, congrats on that, man.
And it's funny, I actually listened to the episode and you made a comment in there like, hey, when are you going to put a ring on it? So you had some foreshadowing there in the last episode. So.
Yeah, it's so funny, man. That's awesome. Congrats to you guys. That is fucking awesome. You guys have been together for a minute now. So I love seeing that, of people getting together, creating their own families and progressing on with their lives. And basically everything you talked about right there too, major life decisions. And I kind of want to dive a little bit into kind of like the kind of COVID aspect of that and how that kind of impacted your life. Because last time we even saw each other, I'm pretty sure it was COVID. Like, that episode.
Pre-COVID.
That episode. So kind of like, how did COVID impact your kind of like day-to-day life? Like, what was going on during that time for you?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully so, like working at a gym, like things closed down. Everything was done. Thankfully, the company kept, some of us working and like kept us busy. But like the uncertainty of like ever coming back to a normal, like the climate we're in, like a gym is one of those like hot zones in everyone's mind. So like me being in a position where like a good amount of my job is to do with like sales and retention and things like that. It was a crazy time to think like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? So I actually started going online, like trying to, get back into school, go like do different courses, try to figure out where my next step was. Cause obviously there was so much uncertainty. And like I said, at the time I was just a sales guy. Like I was just selling memberships. Like, you can't even think of someone new going back to a job that's literally closed. So it was a confusing time, and like also being like in the beginning, like being scared of like people getting sick that and things like that. But it was a roller coaster ride, obviously, with like as things developed, and then everyone got so tense, and like that was a big thing. A lot of like relationships, like there was so much like politics surrounding the situation where like there's countless people that like I like as a person that I just like found myself in arguments with for no reason. It was a crazy time. So, I mean, that was one thing, like a lot of like stress on you as a person. I feel like we all had a little bit of that during that time.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the line of work that you were doing, that's like that was like one of the top stuff that was like you couldn't do that stuff. Like the being in that whole industry, like it's shut down. Like that, like it really was hurt by COVID. So I can imagine that being very difficult in like that time period was probably very causing it's where it really probably caused you a lot to have that kind of looking towards the future. It's like, what do I want to do? Like, where am I going to take my life? Because you're definitely one of those people that's like-minded like myself that definitely looks towards the future, that definitely envisions like like we were talking about off the podcast, so many people don't even think about what they want in the future, and that kind of like sparked this topic too. And like when I keep tabs on everyone that comes on the podcast, so when I saw you hitting all these different milestones in your life, I was like, this would make a really good topic because you're doing the thing that a lot of people want to do, that one maybe don't have the courage, maybe you haven't found that person, maybe don't have the career, like whatever they're looking for, they aren't necessarily, they're very kind of looking for maybe some sort of blueprint or some sort of advice for these different things. Because I even find myself in that space, and like we talked a little bit about that, but like off podcasts, and trying to figure out where I want to go with my career in the next like 5-10 years, and where I want to live in the next 5-10 years. Like there's so many different things that you have to take into consideration, because when you do want things like relationships or family, like you're not only thinking about yourself, but there's other people that are involved in these like decisions, and they're major life decisions. So it's like super important for me to kind of like get your opinion on, like, we'll start with, because like you kind of made the career switch. Like what was like kind of like in your mind, like driving you to like kind of change careers? Because right now we're in like the kind of, a lot of people are jumping from jobs to job, and I was looking at possibly making that leap at one point, and I've chose to stay for now. But like the market was super hot, and like it still pretty is for jobs. So what was kind of like your thought process in terms of like your own career?
Yeah. So, obviously the like job that I had at the time after COVID, taking over, like it was a great position, like good money, like that gave me the opportunity to buy a house. Like I was so grateful for that opportunity. But then that next step was during that time is when, I, proposed, and like now I'm planning a wedding and getting married. And like the biggest step there is like, what is my life going to be like? What does that look like? And no matter what way you spin it, working an hour and a half away, hour plus, like that's going to take a toll on your family life unless you're in a situation that's going to flow. Ultimately, that wasn't a decision that's going to flow. So the choice was really find something closer. And like, truthfully, it wasn't a rushed decision. It was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. But I really didn't jump at the first thing. It was, what do I want to do? Because the caveat to that is I don't want to drive, but I also don't want to be bouncing around at this point. I'm going to be 25. I'm ready to just be like where I'm at. Like, doesn't mean I'll stay in the same company, maybe not the job, but what industry do I want to work in? What certain things are my interests? So a lot of just like digging into myself to find out, all right, what does Brock want to do? Before I had, my thoughts of like, what's college for business? And like, I'm good at sales naturally, but is that what I want to do with my life? And ultimately it came back to experience in construction, and I just liked it. It's a solid business. I mean, there's certain jobs you can never go without. Like someone's got to build something,
Facts.
There's a doctor. Someone's got to make you healthy. Someone's got to help you when you're sick. There's only so many jobs in the world that have that security. we're always going to be building something or tearing it down. So being in that realm was something that I just gravitated towards, and I ended up finding a really great opportunity that my commute went from the hour and change to less than 10 minutes.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that was the big piece. It's family life, not that I'm going to have kids tomorrow, but I would like that aspect in the future. So rather than, oh, I have kids now, can't do this drive, find something now. So now I'm good. When that time comes in my life, I'm already all set. So those are some of the things that went into my mind of like, making the right choice. And the other thing is obviously financial. You never want to take a loss. So you got to find a job that's going to also pay well. At that point, I've already gotten a house. I've got a mortgage. I got bills. But again, it just took some, soul searching, figuring out what drives me. And I came on this opportunity, and that's where I'm at now with that.
Yeah, that's actually really great insight into what you're explaining there too, and like what people could expect when they're looking to think about these things in the future, where they want to go with their job, whether they want to have a family, and like you're doing the things the right way. And like I think I had Eric Lazito on episode, I think it was 44 when he came back the second time, and he actually talked about something similar where he jumped jobs too quickly, and he didn't like the job he jumped to, and he's like, I wish I took the time to just like survey the land. And he's in a good place now, but like at that time he had jumped to a job that he didn't really like. And it was like, I think that's a good piece to kind of reference, because what you're saying is like, you're like, hey, I don't like this commute. I want to be closer towards my family. And thank God with the gas prices, you made the right decision. But it's like, people are so quick to make decisions sometimes, and they don't plan. And I think planning is super underrated. And I mean, I've said it multiple times on the podcast, I'm very big on planning my life out. I mean, I scheduled these podcasts pretty advanced, usually 3 to 4 weeks. I try to like keep things organized, consistent. I'm very big on consistency. And even what you said with like looking for a career that's like has that job stability, I think that actually holds a lot of weight now. And especially we were joking about like insurance before off the podcast, and like these real life like adult things that we don't always think about when we're growing up, but as we're hitting these ages, it's like, oh shit, like I got to actually think about this now. Yeah. And it's like it comes so fast, because like it really is. It's like 1 minute you're 16, then you're 18, you're graduating high school, then you're either going straight into the workforce, career, school, fucking military, like things just happen so fast. And it's like that period of your life, you really don't get a chance to just like breathe. So like kudos to you for having the patience to kind of just breathe and be like, okay, I see the landscape, I see what's going on, but let's make a calculated decision here. And like let's actually kind of like move this in like a kind of like a proper fashion. And like that's something that I've tried to do with myself, and where I'm going with things is like take a survey of where I'm at, because I think that's super important, is to kind of have that self-reflection to be like, this is where I'm at currently. Where do I want to actually go in the future? And most people don't think about that. So, I mean, I give you a lot of props for that. In the terms of like now looking at buying a home, like that's a huge decision. And especially since kind of like you were in like mid 2020, right? You said, so like we're still like hot of COVID. So like what was kind of like your mindset with that? And like maybe you could like walk through some of like the things that you learned through that process.
Yeah. I mean, truthfully, it was hard. Like nothing like it got to where like people are paying ridiculous amount over, waiving all these inspections. Like truthfully, like I got lucky in the property I found, and I still had hardships where people were like, at the time I was looking, people were offering at ask, weren't literally like doing too much, and they were like ready to go. It was a little bit like things were moving faster, but they weren't like they got to.
Yeah.
So I looked countless houses. I was looking all over. Like I was all over the map. I was looking pretty much anywhere in Rhode Island, even some places in Mass. And I was just trying to find something. I knew I wanted something, and honestly, it wasn't calculated towards the economy or anything. Like I had no idea things were going to blow up like they did.
Yeah.
But I was like, I want to do this and I can do this. So I'm going to push. Like some things do happen with just like, again, persistence. I had a real estate agent that really wasn't doing anything for me. My budget was lower than the next guy. And in real estate, they get a percentage. So like this guy was missing showings. Like I wasn't getting houses. Things were going within like 2 or 3 days. And I was on my phone like 24/7. It was like posted 3 minutes ago. And I was emailing him like, I want this. And he'd like get back to me 3 days later. So I went rogue, pretty much looked up all the info I needed to know, asked people that I knew. Like I was versed enough. I just didn't have a real estate license. I was like pretty much on my own, found a house. A buddy of mine, shout him out, Andre, he like has his real estate license, everything. Pretty much told him, I want this house. And he helped me with the legal stuff, the paperwork. But like, I think sometimes you just need to educate yourself and just go do it. Like I knew I wanted it. Wasn't like, there was so many ways of being like, I can't do this. You know, this real estate agent is not helping me. I don't know what to do, but the persistence is what got me there. And I think that's the biggest thing is like research. So many people, like, again, I don't need to know your financial situation to tell you, I guarantee you right now, even with the market like this, you could buy a house. You could. Yeah. There's so many resources. It's unfortunate that people still have the mindset like you need to have like 20% down and all these things. Like anybody can get a house. Like, yes, it's a tougher market. You got to have a little bit more cash right now because of the way things are flowing. But I learned how easy the process was. Like the process, once you found the house, was so seamless. Then it's like, here, sign. I was like, whoa, did this just happen? That's like how easy it went. So,
how did it feel being like becoming a homeowner? That's like such a like it probably was a pretty cool experience, like at a pretty young age too, like to become a legit homeowner. So kind of like what were the feelings around that?
I mean, walking in the house and like being like, this is mine. Like the first, like obviously like I got a house on the lower end, needed some work, and like walking in and being like, I don't like this carpet and just ripping it out. Like that was cool. Like it felt cool just to be like, I don't want that wall there. Knock it down. Rip out your ceiling. Like, yes, that comes with money and you see like, wait, that was expensive. But being able to just like walk in a property and this is yours. It's your house. Like you do whatever you want to it. You can paint it green. You can paint it yellow. You can rip out the walls. You can do this, that. Like that was my favorite part. And then like some of the little like customizing things. Like there was a closet in the kitchen, like one of those like sliding door closets. We ripped out those doors, we made it into a bar. Like outside of the box thinking, we're like, if you're in like a rental, you can't just rip out someone's closet. Yeah. But like being able to just be like, I want that there. I'm going to go do it. Like that. It's such a good feeling to like have that. And like, that's yours. I don't know. Like that.
No, yeah. It makes
like a pride thing. Like,
yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
You have a house. Like,
yeah. I mean, you put in the money, you put in the effort, you did the research. Like you said, I think that is super important to hit on is not a lot of people do the actual research for anything that they do. And like, I think there is some merit to like just doing it. And like, to a sense you did, you just started doing it because this is what you wanted. And that's where like, I have like kind of like a balance thing to it where it's like, you should do the research, you should plan and be educated on the matter, but also start, just go for it. And you have to begin because when you start, I imagine that when you first started looking at it, it was probably a little bit overwhelming to a degree. Like there's a lot of stuff being thrown at you. There's a lot of new terms, a lot of dollar signs in different places. Like I can imagine, I mean, if you want to go into that, like kind of like the education process, like, yeah. I mean, because I usually for a lot of people, they stop learning shit after they graduate. Like usually for some people, it's high school. They stop learning. Yeah. So how did you kind of motivate yourself to kind of to do it yourself? Besides obviously the frustration of a shitty real estate agent.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this also goes like we've all got that time like in high school where they're like, "I'll read this book," and you're like, "Screw you." In like, I feel like now as an adult, you want to know. So like, I want to know about real estate and houses. I want to make sure that I'm getting a good deal. I want to know all the ins and outs. So you pick up that book, you watch that podcast, you learn, and you're more willing to learn when you want to know that information. So that was like the driving force is like, why am I just trusting this guy and I'm gonna go give him 5% of my money for what? Like, I'm fine with giving you that money, but I want to know why I gave you this money. What knowledge did you possess to get paid? So that led me to want to research it. And then also like the fire of like, how much of this can I do? Can I do the groundwork? Can I know it's a good deal? Can I do all this stuff? And that's why I did it. And honestly, that fire has gone into many other things. Like pick up a book, read it. I mean, I was gonna say it in the last like kind of question, but it still fits here. Like, there's a book I read called The Dip. I don't know if you ever like read it.
No,
super quick read. Like you probably read it in a night. It's like 100 pages.
Okay.
And it like explains like your life as essentially like you think like a chart, like stocks, right? And you have to really gauge where you're at. Like if you feel like you're in a lull or in like this like rut, you're at a dip. What kind of dip is it? Is it a dip that's really going to lead into a plateau? You're going to go nowhere? Is it a dip that's going to lead you down? Are you in a bad spot? Or is this dip a spot that's going to bring you right up to the next high? So it all goes into like calculated risk. Like, where are you right now? Like, you got to think about that. Like, shitty real estate agent, that's a dip. I can't get this house. I've looked at 30 houses. I can't get one. Do I give up? Is this going to be constant for another year? Or is my frustration going to lead to something higher? And with a little extra work, it leads to something higher.
No, that's facts. I would say that actually hits really home for me, to be honest. Because, like, for some reason, I feel like I'm in this sort of dip right now where, like, it's almost like a positive thing. And, like, I've kind of spun it in my head to look at it as, like, I don't have really anything going on, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, money's coming in, podcasts are going out, I'm working out, I have a pre-planned trip to Ireland in October.
Nice.
Like,
Nice.
Family's pretty healthy. My older brother is back in the States for good. He's out of the military. My niece is around. Like, life is pretty damn good. And it's like, it feels like a dip almost because, like, over the past 2.5 years, I feel like I've just gone through so much. It's been chaos. And it's not even always personal, but it's like, even with the world and things that are happening out there, everything is so just one after another, just another thing. And I think there's this comparison aspect that social media has created with us, where we look at people and where they are, and there's some sort of jealousy where it's like, I wish I was doing what they were doing. To a degree, I have that jealousy with you. Like, I'm not gonna like hide it and be like, not saying on the podcast, but it's like, it's a respect thing. It's like, you're doing things that I want to do. And it's like, it's almost motivating for me because, like, you're a friend to me, obviously. So it's like, I love the fact that you're doing these things and that we're actually having a conversation on them. Did you ever have that vision too when you're doing these things, like kind of like prior, where it's like maybe you had some friends that were getting married or buying houses or doing these things that you wanted to do? Because like for me, I mean, when I look at you, that like I'm jealous of that aspect of your life that you're able to be in those positions, but it's also I'm patient enough to know I'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I've always looked at it like everything I've done and every conversation I've had, there's been so many people like you that said the same thing, like, oh, I got to get like you. Didn't do it. Like, you can. I did nothing crazy. I didn't go win the lottery. I'm not, born into money. Like, nothing I did was like a luck of the draw kind of thing. Like, anybody can do any of the things. Like, name anything that I've done, anybody can do it. It's not, it's what you want, right? So, like, you tell me that you feel like you're in a dip. I think you just sound like you're just living a chill, comfortable life. Like, you're only like, my biggest thing against like comparing me to you is like, are you happy? If you are, great. If you feel like I'm good with this, then be good with it. Like, you don't need to be hustling and just going through life fast. You can take things slow. Like, I hate comparing because everybody's different. Like, I wasn't in the position that, and I'll avoid, going too in depth with it, but like, I wasn't in a position that I could stay home any longer. I was already out. So I needed to get a house. I needed to do this. Whereas if you don't need to, don't. That's my first thing when someone's like good, like with like their parents or, college roommates that they're splitting like rooms, like whatever your situation is, if you don't need to get into a home ownership or like have the house and like have all of that, or if you're, even as small as like a car, if you got a car that runs and drives, why do you need to go get a payment? Because the next guy's got a new one? No. So that's why I hate comparing, is like everyone's situation's different, and you being an accountant, that. Like, if you can put the money in the bank, it's better there than it is going out.
Well, not anymore. Now with inflation.
Yeah, right.
But like, you hit so many great points right there. And I'm glad that you said a lot of things that you said, because a lot of people feel that way with, and like, I'm glad that you talked about like when people say that to you, is like, I wish I was like kind of in your shoes. Like, well, do it. Like, and it's like, I'm in that space where it's like, I see what you're saying. It's like, I'm comfortable. I'm happy. Like, I'm in a good space, but it's like, I think there's part of human nature that always wants more. And I think that's what the driving force, where it's not so, maybe it's not so much jealousy, but it is that act of human nature where it's like, I like what you have and I want to do the same thing in my life. We share similar values. So I think that also is like a driving force, at least for myself. I'm not going to speak for other people, but the things that you have accomplished in terms of home ownership and like relationship status, like marriage and things like that, those are things that I definitely am looking towards in the future and would hope to eventually reach. So sorry guys, I always have to mess with the camera because I was telling you 30 minutes in the interval.
Yeah.
And if it gets to right at the end, it'll just shut the camera off. And I've had that happen. I'm like, bro, what the hell? But in terms of, we'll start turning into a little bit of kind of like, obviously we're not going to get personal with your relationship, but like kind of, you've been in a committed relationship, and that is something that a lot of people, including myself, have struggled with. And especially through a pandemic, and dating is super hard nowadays. Social media's entered the place. Dating apps are very prevalent in the culture. Some of the things that you think that have worked for your relationship that you might think other people could benefit from?
I mean, truthfully, like, I'll make one side comment just because, like, I have a lot of like friends, coworkers, whatever. Like, I hear some of the like the stories, and like, I'm definitely thankful that I don't have to worry about that, because like, it just seems stressful.
Yeah, you gotta go.
But like, truthfully, it's just about finding the person that like isn't 100% like you. Like, you have to be a little different. You have to have different views, because like, you are going to be your way, that person's their way. But when you come together, like, this person can fix some of your flaws. You can do the same to them. You like kind of mold the right way. And I feel like that's what's worked in my situation, is like, we've had, different upbringings, and we have different views on certain things. And we just have that balance where like, I'm one way, she might be a different way. But when we come together on that area, like, we get it, And I think the biggest thing with everybody, and it might sound cliche because everyone says it, but like, listening, like hearing the person out, realizing that everything is not going to be, rainbows and lollipops all the time. Like, you just have to, like, you can't melt down and shut down after like one disagreement or one issue that happens or differences of opinion. Like, that's life. Once you get past that, like, that's when And, obviously in my situation, it's much different because like, we've been with each other through some changes. Like, I'm not who I was when I met you the last time 2 years ago, never mind 7 years ago when we started dating. So you change as people, but like, meeting someone who's like an opposite of you and you kind of grow with that person, it helps you mold kind of who you are. And again, like, I'll say it, there's zero chance that I would have had any motivation to buy a house, change jobs, do any of these things if I wasn't in a relationship that my mindset was future. You know, like I would have been comfortable. I honestly probably would have just went to some college out of state, and who knows where I'd be right now. I probably would just like be working somewhere, not giving a shit about anything. I wouldn't be in this position because my thoughts were on the future. So I owe a lot to that because I had such a strong relationship that I wanted to move things on. I want to, kind of push and have that hustle because I have the person I'm going to be with forever. So let's get there. Let's find a house. Let's find that place that we're going to start our lives. Let's, get engaged. Let's get married. Let's move on. Let's keep life
Let's do
going.
the damn thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, when you know, and it's easier said than done. Again, like I made the joke about it, but like I can't give anybody advice that's going through like dating scenes and things like that. I got no idea. I really don't.
You don't want it.
I don't know. I don't have the confidence to go meet someone I never met before in a bar. Like good. All the power to whoever does that. Like you are a stronger human than anybody else. Like I had a totally different, situation, and obviously like that I'm grateful for. But again, like it really just takes like listening. I think we talked a little bit about it, is like as you get older, what you want is different. And I think a big thing that can affect that, we talked a little about it, is like knowing where you're at. If you're, again, this is an opinion, I don't want to put that on anybody, but like if you're like in your mid-20s or so, like have an idea of like what you want. It could be a dream. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I want this by that time. But like I think that helps in the like dating people, is like you got to know what you want. If you're just like an I don't know kind of person, it kind of puts a wrench in that. You can't see eye to eye on like if you like kids, you don't like kids. If your ideal is you want to live in this state and this person doesn't want to leave home, like you have to have those common interests. We have to know those interests.
100%, dude. You just fucking nailed that. Like that's something that I am so big on, is like, because like you said, is knowing where you're at. And like I you might not want to say it, but like I'll say it for the people in your 20s. You should like look at these things. You should take this inventory and look at, do I want kids? What do I want for my future? Where do I want to live? I understand I've always said this, I understand the value of kind of going with the flow and doing things, but that is the quickest way to nowhere. Like you're just going to consistently always be just going with the flow. And if you're one of those people that enjoy that, awesome. I'm happy for you. I'm not one of those people. So it's like, for the people who are similar to me and that are struggling in this aspect, you got to kind of find people who are on the same page, and you can't settle with people who don't, with the I don't know mentality. The I don't know mentality is going to get you nowhere. It's going to waste your time, and you're probably going to get feelings hurt because your feelings are going to get involved. The longer you spend with people, the attachment builds and the love builds, and it'll be harder to get over certain aspects. And I've been in those situations myself. I'm the first one to say that on the podcast. I've been in these quote unquote situationships where you get involved in situations where it's like a non-committed relationship, but it's like a relationship where the values are somewhat similar, but the vision isn't there. You both are on different pages, but you care for one another. And in reality, you're just hurting one another because you're not on the same page. You're not trying to get on the same page. And I think that's the problem with a lot of people in the dating market right now. And it's affecting mental health because I think all of us want companionship. I think that's part of the human experience, is to want someone to share life with. Obviously, there's polygamous relationships. Some people enjoy the nomad life, and there's those exceptions to the rule. But I think people in general, connection. That's what I base my podcast off of. And I think the human experience wants that. We do want to have this connection, whether it's with our family, with friends, with loved ones, romantic partners, and such. Like there is this desire for that. And it rolls into this topic that we've had of major life decisions, because that is one of the most important decisions that you can make in your life, because it could really make or break you. Because, right now we're living in a time, at least in America, with divorce rates are the highest they've ever been. The marriage rates are the lowest they've ever been. The birth rates are the lowest they've ever been, at least in like measured times, probably in the last like 50 to 100 years. And I think a lot of it's due to this anxious culture that we live in, partially with social media. You throw a pandemic in there. There's a lot of constant back and forth division in this country. You have wars in other countries, famines in other countries. Like there's a lot happening that people are trying to digest at once. So like it's understandable, but I think a lot of it too is just people just don't know what they want, and like that's a huge problem in our society. And what was the question I wanted to ask you? This was it. Tying, obviously, you don't have to go too deep within like your own relationship, but do you think part of the reason that you guys have had such a successful relationship is because you've gone through a lot of traumatic things together and things that are like big life events?
Yeah.
And do you think that seeing you guys, at least when you're with her and you're yourself getting inventory of yourself and processing the things you've gone through, do you think that like had an impact on like the strength of your relationship?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge part. I think I touched on a little bit because I went over some of the stuff with like my mom on the first episode,
6.
and like again, like I was a different person when like even just like when I met her, then just like as a person, I was just in a tough spot. So finding someone that can like care for you when you're down, like that's big, because those are the points where you either fold or you get lifted back up. And then obviously through the years, like back and forth, we both had different situations that have come up, not with each other, just like with family, with, a job or work, whatever, comes up that, having that person that like no matter what you can turn to, like you can be real with, you can not put on that face that you put on when you go to work, when you're with those friends that are just like your drinking friends, right? We all have those friends where they're friends, don't get me wrong, because they serve their purpose. Their purpose is, I don't want to think about what's at home, so let's go out, let's have a good time, and I'm just gonna have fun. You need those friends too, but the difference that sets you up from the friends and that person for you is that one that you feel like shit today, you can go and be like, I feel like shit today, and this is why. And they're going to either listen to you, maybe give you advice if you need it, just be there, be a shoulder. And I think that's the biggest piece is if you don't know what you want, if you're not open, if you're not honest about yourself, you're never going to have that person be there for you because they don't even know who you are. They don't know the real you.
That's facts. Wow, that would hit. It's like, because it ties into what you said earlier, is this communication aspect. And I literally did a whole episode on the art of communication and how it's literally lacking in society. Episode 102, check it out. I know you guys don't like my solos, but it's cool. It's like the fact of just like, because I was telling you earlier, like I had a cancellation and just like the lack of like communication and like telling me what was up, where you were, what they were doing. It's like, I'm not even a significant partner, and this is the way you communicate with me. I can only imagine the way that you communicate with people that you're super close with. And it's like, no shade at that person, but it's like a lot of people operate like that. And like, I've come across a lot of people, and I was like this in my past too, that would just ghost people. Like you just don't even want to say anything. You just want to leave it where it is. And like, understand sometimes like there's nothing to be said and you just don't want to continue the conversation. But instead of just saying, hey, I don't want to continue this conversation, people just stop talking. And like, I understand there is power in that. And like, there is like, I think there's like a bunch of like, I think the laws of 48, was it 48 laws of power by Robert Greene. I think it's one of the books. And I know he talks a lot about communication. I read the laws of human nature by Robert Greene recently. It's a massive book. It's like 500 pages. And they talk a lot about these things and like how to communicate people, how to read people, how to listen to the tone, the body language, all these different aspects. And I've always accredited the podcast for helping me get better at that, because I was never really good at articulating myself. I mean, maybe you even picked up even the way that we did last podcast to this podcast, the way that I kind of navigate this podcast, the way I articulate myself, the way I lay out the questions and incorporate you in the process. I think I've improved a lot since. I mean, I hope I'd improved a lot since then, but it's like, you got to put in effort. Like you got to actually like try to get better at these things. And that's a lot of things that you've said is kind of like hitting home at that point. Is like, if you want to do these things, you have to actually try, Yeah.
You need to have, and again, one point we made is like, you got to have accountability. Like I'll use the example because it's the truth, is like this podcast, like, it is a scheduled event, like if I like, it's crazy to think that like I need to put in my calendar if I make plans. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go golfing. It's in my calendar. I'm literally going to the range. It's not that serious. There's no tee time. I'm going to the range, but I want to be there at a time. So it's in my calendar. This was in my calendar. Like, you got to organize your life. You're never going to be ahead if you're not somewhat organized and just accountable for it. You know, if you pick a time, like we talked about it, we've discussed multiple times this week, to blow you off is just, it's irresponsible. And then at some point, like even the smallest little thing, whether it's an oil change in your car, like just be accountable. Put it in your calendar and show up. And step one.
I'm so big on that, man. I'm glad that you brought up accountability, because that is another thing it's like, there's a bunch of things lacking in society right now. It's fucking crazy, but it's like, you can thank social media for that, but like, that's one of the things you could thank for it. But it's like, I think it also stems to sometimes from upbringing and role models, because if you don't see that actually shown to you while you're growing up, whether it's through your parents, through sports, through teachers sometimes, that, and you know those kids that when you go through school that just like didn't care, that didn't try, that just never showed up, whether they showed up late to practice or didn't turn in homework assignments, and like that is a huge indicator of someone who's not accountable. And unfortunately, we live in a system right now where it's like you give a participation trophy to everyone that does something, so you can't really hold people accountable. Like, we don't have winners and losers anymore, and that's fucking awful, because now everyone's a winner, and like that's not good for morale. Like, the Boston Celtics lost the other night. They're fucking losers. Like there's a reason. Like, the Golden State Warriors are champions. Like, and that's why they're celebrated. They're valued. Like, this hard work, and they're accountable. And like, shout out to like even like a lot of those like players in the Celtics that they're gonna have to hold themselves accountable for that loss and those fucking turnovers, man. Like, goddamn. But it's like, it even rolls into sports, into business, into like your family, into your, I don't know, like the podcast, your hobbies, everything that you do. You should make a schedule for it. I don't know if you got that from a podcast somewhere. Like, I feel like I've heard that from I don't know if it was Andy Frizzle. I forget his name.
Motherfucking CEO.
Yeah. I don't know if it was him or no. I heard it on my favorite podcast, Fresh and Fit. But like they, I think they had a guest on, and he showed his phone, like his Google, like his like a Google app or Google Calendar. Everything was blocked off. He's like, I'm for everything, even sleep. He's like, I book everything in my calendar. He's like, you got to know what you're doing. Like, he's like, I leave room for things to change, but you got to put the stuff in that you're doing and hold yourself accountable. Because if you're not holding yourself accountable, you're just kind of running in circles doing the same shit all the time. So I'm glad that you really brought that up, because like, I think that's really lacking in our society with that and responsibility, especially with these major life decisions. I want to kind of talk about too, like the concept of marriage, because that's like such a big institution that, like I mentioned, like the marriage rates are super low. So like, what was kind of like going through your head? Is it like because like maybe the length of the relationship and maybe your own personal values, which you obviously don't have to get into, but like, how did you come to that?
A combination of that, obviously, like, again, I'll bring it up, not saying that my way is the best way. Like, everyone has their own view, but just like knowing that that's what I wanted. And again, like I said a little while ago, knowing that it's attainable and I can do it. So if I can do it, what's next year? What's 2 years? What's 5 years? Could it have been 5 years from now? Maybe. But why? And that's just like, takes a second. You got to deeper think that. You have to sit back, think about where you're at in life and where do you want to be. If it came down to we're not ready, or, you know, maybe a major thing in the house broke and I couldn't, you know, afford to even think about getting married. Like, those are the things that, like, yeah, you could not do it right now, or you can change things up. But I mean, realistically, you know, and I'll be totally honest, like, family is a big thing. And, you know, it's not a secret. Like, I've been sharing on Facebook, you know, Tiff's godmother, her aunt, is battling cancer. It's pretty tough, and she's important to her. So that's also a big part, is like, we want our family to be a part of that day. So we're engaged, we want to get married. Well, we want to also do it and have her a part of that. So pushing a wedding to get married in 5 years. Like, not saying this or that. Like, obviously no one knows how life goes, but let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get married. Let's have everyone that's important to us be there. Let's make that happen. And like I said, I'm just big on like, you can do it. It might be hard. You might be stressed out. You might have to do, extra hours at work or whatever you need to do. But if you want it, get it done. And that's like a big driving force into like that whole family aspect is that's a huge part. That's important. So being that that's so important, you make it happen. You make it work and you do it. And again, that's a foundation of why I feel like we're successful in our relationship is like, we kind of just give each other the look of like, all right, we're going to do this. Let's do it. Let's get it done. So.
No, yeah, I like that. Switch up the video for real quick. But, family is like, cause I usually, now I don't know if I did that on that episode 6. So I've kind of gotten into like a rhythm now that I've done it, but I usually open up with family dynamic, and I think I did back then. Yeah. At least we talked about it enough.
That was most of our episodes.
But like with family, coming from the family that I do, and I'm very privileged to have both my parents have been together my entire life, and the amount of people that I've talked to that weren't lucky to have that. So it's like, I definitely have learned to appreciate it more, especially growing up. You mature, you understand the value of family. And I think a lot of people don't have that model, so they don't know what they're really looking for, what they want, because they didn't have that growing up. And I think there's an aspect of that that's missing in that decision. It affects their relationships. Like, people talk about it here and there, and I've seen it on TikTok and YouTube and different podcasts where the stuff we go through as children really does affect our relationships. And until you address that when you're older, and like sometimes for myself, like I had to go to therapy and address a lot of the stuff that I was doing because a lot of the behaviors were, quite frankly, in my opinion, toxic, and they were negatively affecting my relationships, and including my relationship with myself. So it's like, even coming from the family that I did, I still had my issues that I had to work through. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that internal work to figure out, to get to that place where you're making these major decisions, to figuring out what you want. The first step, I'd say, in making these major life decisions is looking in the mirror. It's like my old football coach, Vernon Crawford, always used to say, like, after like we'd lose a tough game, it's like, what do you boys want? Like, you got to look yourself in the mirror. And like, obviously you don't have to literally look yourself in the mirror, but for me, I like the literal sense of things. Like, I literally would spend hours just kind of like staring at myself and like thinking and meditating on it. It's like, what do I want? And like, obviously it's even held like weight if I'm talking about it now and I'm 27 and like this is like high school, he gave this advice. So like, for the people that are listening that are wondering about making these major life decisions, and you want to get to where you are, Brock, or where I am, where I got with this podcast, or whatever it is, or any of the guests that have come on my podcast, to get to their place and their platform, you got to figure out, and you got to take that first step and be, how do I say this, self-aware. Mm-hmm. And I think self-reflection is like one of the biggest factors in doing that. I want to start bringing this podcast home. I think we've hit on a lot of great points of this podcast, and you've been fucking phenomenal. Like, I just want to say that. I kind of want to give you the floor to kind of like wrap things up, and I'll give my little spiel after, but your kind of thought process, whether it's some motivational advice, whether it's kind of just your opinion on the major life decisions, the title of this episode.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of like hit on some of the major points is, be accountable, know what you want, figure out what makes you happy. Don't compare yourself to somebody else. Don't beat yourself up about it, and just really live a life that you want to live, and whatever that might be. I like this saying because, it gives a good laugh and it's also motivational. Just send it. Whatever. Just do it. Like, if that makes you happy, if that gives you joy, if you enjoy the way you're living, have at it. Good for you. That's it. I mean, that you can have success in whatever that might be. If it's buying a car or buying a house or just being comfortable, good for you. Happy for you.
Love that, Brock. This has been a fantastic episode. Glad to catch up. This has been awesome. We'll definitely have to do this again.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you coming on and being extremely vulnerable with your life and talking about this topic, major life decisions. So appreciate you. For you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe. You can share it with your friends, your family, your grandma. Check it out, the Carroll Connection, simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. So until next time, guys, peace.